What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad Podcast. Today, I am stoked to talk to Mike McCarthy. Very much a BizDad. Absolutely love everything you've been doing over at GoBundance and FamBundance, and really looking forward to kind of digging into to a little bit more of your background, getting to know you a bit more, Mike, and introducing you to my audience, which at the moment is mostly GoBundance guys, so they probably already know you anyways, but it's going to be fun anyways to have a good conversation. So, Mike, if you can, go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us about your family, and tell us about your businesses in your case.
Thanks, Adam. Great to be here. So my name's Mike McCarthy, as you stated earlier. I've got a wife named Lindsay and two kids, Ember and Tyler. Tyler's 16. Ember is 12 years old. We live in Austin, Texas, where we've been for about 5 years. One of my main businesses, and the first one that I was a part of growing and leading, is the greater Pennsylvania region for Keller Williams Realty. And we basically develop franchises and put on training and leadership events and identify franchisees and help them to stay true to the franchise contract that they execute with Keller Williams. Still have that business today. It's run by a couple of people who are a lot smarter than I am, so frees me up quite a bit to do things like GoBundance, which is a mastermind group that I co-founded with three of my best friends. And we've got across our different divisions around 1,200 members. It's a group for high net worth achievers who've already succeeded at a high level in business and who are looking to up level in other areas of their lives and become a whole life millionaires, so that their relationships, their ability to have fun, their give back in their communities are all at just as high of a level of performance as their businesses. That's been a business that really started as just a couple of guys going on a trip annually and setting goals and showing up for one another. And now it's turned into a business that's thriving and doing amazing things. And then I'm currently the CEO of the family division of GoBundance, which is called FamBundance, and we help bring families together and give them a facilitated experience where they get to dive into their visions, values, and rhythms, and do it in a place where they're having fun and able to engage the whole family in a way that they wouldn't be able to do at home and on their own.
Welcome to the BizDad Podcast, where we dive into the melding of fathership and entrepreneurship with your host, the original BizDad himself, Adam Labar. Adam is a Christian, a former Air Force officer, a dad to three amazing kids, a coach, a real estate investor, and a business owner. On this podcast, he'll explore the unique journeys of amazing dads who are striving for greatness in both business and family. So whether you're a dad who is an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a man striving to be a better dad, get ready as the BizDad brings you conversations to inspire, challenge, and equip you to be a better dad and entrepreneur. And now, here's Adam.
That's phenomenal stuff. As a guy who's in GoBundance and FamBundance, I could definitely attest to the awesome group of people. And honestly, FamBundance was the thing that kind of kicked me over the edge. I was in a dad mastermind before that, and it was not... I think it was probably just my poor experience at the beginning that didn't work out so well. And then I dropped out of that and ended up jumping into GoBundance. The second I heard about the FamBundance side, I was like, oh, this is definitely something I want to do as I continue to grow the family out. I want to kind of rewind a little bit and learn a little bit more about your background, kind of understand who you are, where you came from, like how you got to where you are. So one of the biggest things I love to do on this podcast is chat about people's dads and understand a little bit more. I've got a small understanding of who your dad was, but not from the when Mike McCarthy was a kid. You know, what was it like for you kind of growing up with your parents, specifically your dad, because this is a dad podcast, but definitely talk about your mom as well so I can understand what it's like for you growing up.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was always a leader. He was a doer. He never let the grass grow beneath his feet. He was always chasing something and always building something. He decided at a very young age that he wanted to become an entrepreneur and own a business with his sons. He only ended up having one son, which was me. So really only one child. So I was his only shot. And I think the way he raised me reflected that, because he was pretty hard on me in a good way. Really wanted to make sure that I had great values, knew how to be a leader. And also he kept pointing me in the direction of entrepreneurship. I remember when I was probably 10 years old, him sitting me down and saying, what job would you like to have? And when you're 10 years old, you're thinking cowboy, policeman, fireman, you rattle off all the things that look fun on TV. And then he very quickly came back the next day with the average salaries of each of those people, but he didn't tell me he had done that. First, he said, what kind of life do you want to live? And he said, do you want a house? Do you want a car? What kind of car? Would your wife have a car? How many kids would you have? Do you want a house that's the same size or bigger than the house we live in? And he had me basically write out all of my expenses as an adult. And as I would list what it was, he would say, well, that's going to cost you $5,000 a month. That's going to cost you this amount per month. And, do you want to go on vacations? And, by the time we got done with that exercise, there was a list of, $120,000 worth of expenses. And then he pulled out the average salaries of all these professions that I wanted to do and kind of showed like, hey, if you want to live the life you just said, you're going to have to be an entrepreneur or a doctor or a lawyer. And so for a long time, I wanted to be like a doctor. The problem with that is not only do I not like school, I'm not very good at it. And you kind of got to be good at school to be a lawyer as well. And if I was bad at one thing in school over anything else, it was test taking. So passing a bar exam and thinking about being in school for another 8 years was just too much. And I also had a natural kind of ability to be a entrepreneur. Like it was in my blood. I think either way, without my dad sort of pointing me in that direction or not, and even giving an opportunity to be in business with him, I'm certain that I would have become an entrepreneur anyways. So it worked out great. We didn't always get along, my dad and I. I thought I knew a lot more than I actually did. And it turns out the older I got, the smarter he became. And, now even still, he's passed away for a couple of years. I continually realized just how smart he was and just what a great job he did as a father, and continue to grow my respect with him and even heal parts of our relationship even after his passing by trying to understand him more deeply. And I even did some work with a therapist, and she was like, hey, what are some of the worst times you ever had with your dad? And I listed them out, and she said, well, what do you think your dad was trying to do at that time? And with every single one that came up, she was like, nope, that's not what he was doing. Here's what he was doing. And when she said each time, it was 3 different experiences, what he was thinking most likely compared to what I thought he was trying to accomplish. It just flipped everything on its head. And I had like a pretty big breakthrough personally when that happened, and just realizing I'd always had great respect for my dad, but much of it had come from being great business partners. There was a part of me that still felt like maybe he was too controlling and a little too hard on me. And, those things were true in some ways, but in the end, like he was always looking out for me. He always put his all into being a great father. And so it took a lot of learning and a lot of growing both together and in business. And then me personally, for me to really, truly appreciate the depths to which I had an amazing father.
Hey, everybody, wanted to step in to discuss something. If you're anything like me, you've ran into some time in your business where you feel a little overwhelmed with some of the mundane tasks that eat up your valuable time. You're working more in the business than you are on the business, right? If that's you and you're hearing this and you're saying, boy, it is time to reclaim some of my schedule back, to focus on what truly matters. You want to get time back with elite remote talent with 0 time zone hassle. Check out one of my partners that I just recently partnered up with, WiseVAs.com. BizDad.com/Adam is where you go to check these folks out. Delegate $10 an hour tasks to focus more on the $1,000 an hour tasks, the things that are really transforming your business. Get rid of some of those transactional things and do some more of the transformational inside of your business. So again, schedule your free strategy call at wisevas.com/Adam. Wise, WISEVASVAS.com/Adam. Again, let's get rid of some of those transactional tasks and move them into transformational tasks. It's been a phenomenal team to work with. I really look forward to sharing them with you. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to discuss with you what's going on as well. But again, wisevas.com/Adam. Thank you very much. And now back to the episode. No matter how many times I talk to guys on this podcast, almost all of them talk about it wasn't until they were in their 30s until they realized kind of who their dad was instead of who they thought their dad was. Was this a transition for you that you picked up on before he passed? Like you started to really understand who he was, or was it not until it was like close to him passing before you figured it out?
I mean, I think a good portion of it got figured out. You know, for me, one of the things that I had to overcome in my life and am still working on is that, you know, I wanted, because he was hard on me, there was a part of me that believed that I needed to make him proud in order for him to love me. He didn't feel that way. He loved me no matter what. But I felt like for me to get love from anyone, including him, I needed to make the world proud. I needed to make him proud. And so there's a part of me that was always chasing external validation. And, you know, I think it was great. It served me because I built some incredible businesses and, you know, I achieved a lot financially and in business and won awards and made him proud. You know, and he came to me later in life and said, you know, one of the greatest business decisions that I ever made was partnering with you. Like, you were the best partner that I could have ever picked. And we got to do this together as father and son. And, you know, that was probably when I was I'm 47 now. That was probably when I was just 40 years old and finally got that validation. And it was bittersweet because what I realized is that even with that validation, there was still a part of me that needed to validate myself, needed to make myself proud, needed to feel good and worthy because of who I am and not because of what others or other people think that I am. So it was tough. And I think probably I came to know my dad more and more through his 8-month passing with pancreatic cancer. And then in his absence, the pain of not having him there was so intense that it revealed to me just how much I loved and cared about him, where I think part of me didn't necessarily want to believe that that was true. Like, I wanted to be my own man and be independent, and I didn't want to need him. But what I realized was that I loved him so much and I did need him. And obviously I'll be okay without him because he prepared me for this. And, you know, he used to always say, like, I'm not going to be around forever and you got to enjoy your life, son, because you only get one and nobody gets out alive. And, you know, those types of things I would kind of shrug off. But, you know, now I see the brilliance in what he was saying and also the brilliance in how he led his life, because he knew he didn't know how much time he had. His father passed pretty young, and he, you know, could have taken probably better care of himself, had some heart issues. So he led and lived his life just as if somebody would who knew that they only had a limited amount of time. And so now, knowing the preciousness of life, I can see the beauty and the intelligence and just how he showed up and lived.
So I want to rewind a tiny bit again and go back to the 10-year-old conversation you had on kind of building out that life. Like, what sort of life did you guys already have at that point that you were, because at 10 years old, you're everything is a comparison game, right? So you were comparing it to something, what you wanted and what you saw and all this stuff. Like, what is it that the kind of life were you living at 10 years old that you were kind of like, no, this is why I want this. This is what I'm seeing. This is where I'm going. Yeah.
I mean, we had a average middle class lifestyle at that point. There was no wealth. We didn't fly first class. I was not living the life that my children are living.
Yeah.
Right now. And that being said, like I never didn't have what I needed. There was always food on the table. But my parents were both working, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. I was a latchkey kid, left at home a lot on my own, babysitters when I was much younger. And didn't have any brothers or sisters. So, I was living a life that, I could say I really valued like the possibility of someday having more than one child because I always wanted a brother and sister. And, my dad was a real estate agent and then a real estate broker, but he had never thought until much later in life, till I was 16, 17, did he ever even think about owning his own real estate brokerage. And he was very good with money and saving, and he'd always dreamed of becoming a millionaire. And he accomplished that at, I'm not sure what age, but he did it through a W-2 and through working for other people. And it wasn't until he started launching his own businesses, until we launched a business that exploded, that he really experienced a different type of wealth. And so we sort of got to build that together. But I also had the benefit of like, I always had the clothes, the food, we went on a vacation once a year. We had a motor home, we'd go camping. But it was very much a middle-class upbringing.
Where did he pick up that thought process then on the, was it just because his dad died kind of young that he picked up that thought process of, hey, you don't know how much time you have, so just enjoy what you have, and then started going off and chasing that with you? Or, when did you think that he really started to pick up on that?
I think that he always just was a driven person. He had a younger brother. He was the sort of leader, took care of his younger brother. Still to this, his younger brother actually passed away just a few months ago. And I took care of him in his absence. And I think my dad just always thought it was his role to take care of the people around him. And so having that responsibility is a great motivator to have you not sit around and do nothing and stay active. And when you come from nothing, because his upbringing was poor, he had a very different upbringing than I did. So where we were middle class, he grew up pretty much poor. And my grandparents were in some ways financially supported a lot by him later on in their lives. They barely just had enough to scrape by. They would spend a lot of money. They wanted to live a more luxurious lifestyle, and they did, but they couldn't afford it. Yeah. And so I think he saw that and wanted more for himself. And I think even a better question, Adam, might be, where did he get the desire to become a millionaire? Because when he was a kid, he decided, someday I'm going to be a millionaire. And that came from a pretty unique story of my grandfather worked in factories, was very much blue collar and didn't earn a lot of money, was struggling paycheck to paycheck. But he was really good with people. And he was one day crossing a bridge in a rainstorm and saw a guy pulled over in a suit trying to change his tire. Probably looked a lot like I would if I was on the side of the road trying to change a tire, frustrated, didn't maybe look like he didn't know what he was doing exactly. And my grandfather pulled over and started talking with the guy, changed the tire for him, and went to send him on his way. And the guy said, hey, you're really good with people. I'm in the insurance business. I own an insurance agency. I think you'd be really good at selling insurance. What do you do? And he kind of told him, and he said, well, here's the thing. You haven't quite worked with people at the level that I would need you to in order to come and work for me yet. But here's a number of my friend who runs a bread company, like where they would deliver your bread and milk and ice cream and stuff every day. I want you to go work for him for 1 year. And if you do well with that in customer interaction and showing up on time and meeting deliveries, then come back to me and then I'll give you a job selling insurance. And so he did just that. He did the bread truck for a year. And then after that went into insurance sales, and he did well in that, much better than he'd ever done before. And then my dad got to move from inner city Cleveland on the east side out to the suburbs in Menor, Ohio, which is a huge lifestyle change. And so when my dad witnessed that and heard that story and saw my grandfather go up a level sort of in affluence, he realized that it was possible for him to do the same thing. And that's when he at a young age, when he moved to the suburbs, I'm not sure exactly what age, but 10, 12 years old, he decided, you know what, I'm going to take this to the next level when I grow up, and I'm going to become a millionaire, and I'm going to own, I'm not just going to, work in sales. I'm going to own the business. And it's interesting because he right out of the gate started, when he moved to Colorado, he worked for a while doing various jobs, and then he worked being a repo man for a delivery rental company. And he used to just get his ass kicked, like in Denver, rough areas, knocking on doors, trying to take people's televisions. You can imagine what ensued in that type of environment. And he ended up working his way up to owning a good chunk of what was called Friendly Dan, the TV man. And they actually had the cheesy commercials that you see local car dealers and stuff do on your local channels. He would write and produce and star in his own TV commercials for Friendly Dan, the TV man. Everyone thought his name was Dan, but that was just the name of the company. And I actually still have those commercials. Like they got transferred to electronic, and I oftentimes will look back and see my dad in those commercials as a young man, 20 years old. Then when he got into real estate sales, he kind of owned his own business. But then when he became the broker, he just started working for someone else. And I think he was kind of miserable during that time of his life, because he'd sort of like fallen into, I got a pretty good salary, but I'm building someone else's wealth. Then the business got sold out from under him, and new people came in, and their brilliant idea was to put all the real estate agents on salary and give them company cars, and they could earn their salary based on the number of sales, which is the worst idea in the history of real estate. And they told him that if he didn't implement it, they would fire him and find somebody who did. So he did. It didn't work. They fired him anyways. And that opened the door for him to go work for Keller Williams, where it's way more entrepreneurial. And instead of just being the broker manager, he got to be part owner of one of the first Keller Williams in Colorado, which was franchised out of Texas. And then he crushed it. And then the opportunity flowed from there.
So as you were growing up, kind of where were you at age-wise throughout those transitions for him? And what did you kind of see as the son, like looking at your dad and like the time you got to spend and the conversations you had as each of those transitions happened?
Yeah, well, I was too young to really remember the Friendly Dan days. So I only got to hear the stories about those and see the commercials. And then I was very aware of when he was a corporate guy working for a corporation that owned real estate companies, because we'd go to corporate parties and they had like programs for the kids to do these work programs at ranches. And I was very aware that he didn't own that business and he had all these bosses. It was when I was 16, actually, that he had gotten fired from that job, and Keller Williams was recruiting him. And he actually took me to like an all-day seminar, like at one of those sports arenas where it was like Dan Jensen and the coach of Notre Dame, I forget his name now at the time, but and Zig Ziglar were like some of the keynote speeches. And he gave me the option, like, hey, do you want to go to this success seminar? I'm like, no. He's like, well, it's on a weekday. You'll get to miss school. And I'm like, hell yeah, I'd like to go. So he took me to that. And when we were on a lunch break, he actually diagrammed out for me on like napkins the entire Keller Williams business model. And I wrapped my head around it at 16, and I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. He explained to me how his previous brokers had worked, and then how he was going to do it and how Keller Williams did it. And it just blew my mind. And what I couldn't get out of my head was when he was like, yeah, and I'm going to get to own, I think it was like 3 or 4 or 5% of this first office. And he's like, and then we own it forever. And we could, and if someone wanted that, they'd have to buy it out, but I could keep that passive income forever. And, you know, we were running the math like, oh my God, like if it made 500 grand a year and you owned 5%, like, oh my gosh, like you would earn that without doing anything forever. Like, and it just burned a hole in my head about entrepreneurship and about passive income. At 16, I was like, I'm going to own businesses and I'm going to make passive income, like for sure. And so then I got to watch him go do it, and not only launch the first Keller Williams, but then launch 7 or 8 more as that he owned part of. And I was like, holy shit. Then I watched him put a deal together where he bought the region, the Colorado region, from the guy who owned it originally. And he was very savvy at putting deals together and in sales. So it's a lethal combination of deal maker and able to sell people into the idea. And then he crushed it and launched, 10 more. There ended up being like 16, 17 Keller Williams franchises in Colorado. And then he got the opportunity to open Pennsylvania, which is the business that I ended up getting to be partners with him on.
Okay. So you were a little older then anyways when he started to really chase that portion of it down. So you were like ready mentally to already kind of go in there.
Yeah, I graduated graduated college right as the greater Pennsylvania region became something that he was a half owner of. And he owned it 50% with the guy who also owned Colorado region. And when I came on board, I just kept nudging him like, let's get out of business with that guy, sell out of Colorado, and let's do Pennsylvania. Because I actually was in charge of mapping out all the territories. And I could tell that even though there was 0 offices in Pennsylvania and there was 16 in Colorado, I could tell there'd be 40 or more in the other region. And it was a much bigger opportunity. And he ended up taking my advice a little bit begrudgingly, went and tried to talk to his partner. His partner blew up and yelled at him, said, "You're nothing without me. I built this. I was the money behind it all." And my dad's like, "Yeah, we're no longer partners. You're buying me out." And that created the opportunity for me to then eventually be his business partner, just him and I in that region.
Wow. Yeah, that sometimes those true colors when they show up are very. I didn't realize this was the partner that I had. Wonderful. Yeah, great.
His attitude cost him millions of dollars and created an opportunity for me to step in. So I'm really happy he had that outburst.
Yeah, I bet. No kidding. So as you've been kind of raising your kids, right? Was it 16 and 12? Your kids are, Ty and Ember?
Yep.
So what sort of things do you look back on, the experiences that you saw with your dad kind of growing up, and you know, good, bad, indifferent, whatever it was, that you were like, man, I really want to apply this with my kids, or boy, I definitely don't want to apply this with my kids, that, you know, what sort of things would you come to mind there?
You know, like introducing them to entrepreneurship, always encouraging them to like sell stuff. My little girl was, you know, top 3 in sales for Girl Scout cookies, which is like a little mafia. If you've ever been a part of that, it's quite remarkable how they get little girls to peddle their sugar. And watching her thrive in the sales part of that and love the competition. You know, they went to Acton Academy, my daughter for a little while, my son for longer, where they have business fairs every twice a year where you start a business, and it's like a little farmer's market with kids selling different things. So, you know, he did quite a few businesses in that. And then I think just, you know, making it so that just because I have wealth doesn't mean that they're going to get a free ride. Yeah. It's something that I've had to really put in place. And that's different than from how my dad raised me. It was sort of like, we'll take care of everything. We just want you to be the first person in our family to go to college. Like, and they gave me a car, not a great car, but a car, which was, you know, amazing. But with my son, who's 16, like, we made him pay for half of his car, or a good chunk of his car. We making him pay for part of his insurance. And I think that part is huge, but probably the biggest thing that I've wanted to do differently in my family is to really be there. My parents were always there for me in a sense, and I love them, and they did an amazing job, and they did the best that they could because they were striving to create a bigger life. But we didn't spend a lot of time together as a family. It was like a couple times a year on vacation, and then our weekends were centered around whatever it was they wanted to do, and I got dragged along. So if there was a big game or whatever, we were in the bar, and I was given quarters and like, go play games, kid, kind of thing. And I don't fault them for it. Like, they work their asses off all week, and I understand how challenging parenting is, and not all parents want to go hang out at Chuck E. Cheese on the weekends and do all that kind of stuff. But I realized the importance of that in bonding and forming the relationship. So I'm not a workaholic. I never overwork. I'm home for dinner pretty much every night. And we do a lot as a family. Like, we spend a lot of time together, and we talk about how do we be a great family. And we have family values that we've defined together as a family, and we set goals as a family. And we really know what are the rhythms, game night, movie night, family meeting every week that we do that make us a strong family. And we focus in on those things. My parents were there wasn't a manual to family, and there wasn't for me either, but that's why my wife and I were like, let's write one.
Yeah.
Let's be purposeful about how we want to do this, and not just do it the way that our parents did, which was without a lot of intentionality behind it. So we've tried to be really intentional about what does our family life look like, and how do we spend quality time together as a family, and make sure that our kids also know that I love them no matter what. Like, they don't have to go do anything. I love them because of who they are, not what they do. And they don't need to earn my love. They get it. And, I don't think my parents intended for me to feel like I needed to prove to them I was worthy of their love, but I know it was still my experience. So I try to tell my kids all the time how much I love them. Sometimes they even get annoyed with me about how often I say that I love them. And I also try to tell them that I'm proud of them, but more importantly, I tell them you should be proud of yourself.
Yeah.
You should really know that you are somebody who's worthy of all the good things in life because of who you are. You're a great person. You're a great human. I love the way you show up. And I try to really affirm to them what I see in them. And I also try to not criticize them a lot. It's not that it doesn't happen, but I try not to be very critical of them. And I try to set boundaries and lead by example. But, when I was a younger parent, I would fall into criticizing more than I would like to admit. But then as I got older and became a little wiser about this journey and some of the things that didn't serve me when I was a kid, it became evident that criticizing them and making them feel like they didn't do something the right way was not the right way to be a great parent.
So you started having kids. So you said you're 47, your oldest is 16. So at 31 is when you had your first kid.
Yep.
So, and you had started jumping in the Keller Williams at around 22 when you graduated. So in those 9 years, had you already built a decent amount of wealth and a decent business portfolio, or how did that kind of look for you?
It's interesting. Like, I remember when my wife was pregnant with my son, we actually climbed Kilimanjaro. And the reason we did that, which
I'm sure she was thrilled about that, being pregnant. Yeah.
Well, she was risky, right? Like, she was in her second trimester.
Jeez.
But we'd already paid for the trip. And more importantly, I didn't have $10,000 to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I actually had to borrow it from my mom and pay her back on like installments with interest. So I didn't have much wealth at all, even at the age of 31. My wealth came when it was evident that I had been leading a thriving business that was crushing it. And my dad was in a position where he finally allowed me to have the equity that I'd been working for my whole life. And that came, 15 years after I started, did it really start to be where he's like, yeah, you're my business partner. I could not have done this without you. You deserve this. And so we became, by the time I was probably 35, maybe 37, he started to say, hey, you're 35% owner of everything that you've built. And that's when I started to make a lot bigger distributions. Yeah. I started having more money than I could spend, and was able to start investing and being smarter about my money and, stacking it away.
Okay. Were you able to see at that time that your dad was getting a whole lot more, but yet you were working your butt off and not?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because, David Osborne, he's my partner. He's one of my best friends. He was an early mentor to me. I remember being like at an early GoBundance event and hearing what everyone else was making and being like, oh shit, man, like I'm not making very much money doing what I'm doing. Like, and I remember like innocently saying to David, do you think I should try to change anything with my dad? Because like he's making all the money and I'm doing all the work and it doesn't feel fair. And David said something like David always does, super direct. He was like joking, but he's like, yeah, screw him. What does he deserve? But he was making a point. Like, he's your dad. He gave you this opportunity. Like, don't be a dick. And, and he did it in a way that only David could do, where I was like, oh yeah, you're right. You're right. And it went on to say something like, you're going to get yours. Your dad's going to take care of you. You just need to hang in there and keep proving that it's you who's carrying the torch, and it'll come to you if you just stay in there and keep doing the work. But yeah, great question. 'Cause that was actually a moment in time that's, etched into my brain of being like, not even, just barely a millionaire. And it was, I had very little opportunity and equity and had just done a decent job of like saving up over the years to kind of get there. And then adding up, like, I had a few little pieces of ownership of different Keller Williams franchises that I invested in. And, I'd add all of that up and probably overinflate it just slightly so I could be like, okay, I'm a millionaire. I deserve to hang out with these guys.
Yeah.
And then fast forward, now it's like, it's amazing how quickly it can change when your main investment is a business that's crushing it. And, when you have a business and it's making, 500, 600,000 a year, and you've got a couple different partners or whatever, it's not FU money by any means. But when you 10X that and you're making $5 million a year on a business, now all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a second. This is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how quickly that can change. Like it changed really rapidly. Like when I look back on it, I'm like, wow, I went from not feeling very wealthy to being like, holy shit, pretty fast, within basically 7 or 8 years.
Yeah. Now it sounds like then the first 5 or so years of your son's life, which means about the first year of your daughter's life, you were still kind of in the trenches, not making a ton, but until you had that conversation with your dad to start to get the larger distributions. So like, how did the involvement change? What I'm trying to kind of break down here is I don't want somebody to hear that, oh, it's super easy to be an involved dad when you already have a bunch of money, you have kids after you have a bunch of money, which is true unless you're chasing the money more and more. But those 5 years, like how involved were you able to be with your kids and being able to stay engaged while you're still trying to build and you're in that growth mode, compared to obviously now when you're in a different position and you're already said you dedicate a lot of time with your family?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. When my kids were really young, I with 2 other entrepreneurial couples that were in our circle, we were having a weekly family mastermind Before
Nice.
GoBundance and FamBundance even existed, I was always into collective genius, sharing ideas, working through a community. And, we would do things with these other families and go on vacations and do these masterminds once a week where we'd have babysitters, and we would meet for an hour as parents and support each other and talk about how we could be better parents. And so I think I was always really good at drawing the line on 40 hours is plenty of hours to work to build your empire. It's just what 40 hours are you going to choose? Is it on the 80% and doing a bunch of crap that doesn't matter? Or can you get really clear on what matters most? And so I've always been pretty good and pretty stingy with my time, especially when it comes to work. Like if I don't think that what I'm working on is moving the ball forward in some way, I just won't work. Like if I don't have something that I can do that I know tangibly is building the business, then I don't work until that opportunity comes back up and comes around again. And I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, we mistake success with productivity and or being busy, like that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the right things. It just means you're busy. And I just refuse to waste time doing things that don't matter. And I'm also very good at delegating. I don't have a problem with asking other people to do their job and to step up, and going through the pain of finding great people was something I was committed to. And so, I made a lot of mistakes in hiring, but I got quite a few right. And that's what ended up leading to freedom. Even when I was building, having the right team enabled me to not have to do everything. So I worked a lot more before I had kids, just because I was a Colorado kid that moved to Philly and didn't have any friends or social life. So I didn't have anything better to do than work. But then once I had a wife and kids, I was very clear that 40 hours was plenty of hours to work in a week.
And that's something that most entrepreneurs and driven people don't necessarily catch from what from my experience. A lot of them are just like, I'm building this, and forget that, the whole purpose of you building it is the family that's inside of your house, right? Unless it's for your own ego's sake, which tends to be the case. So how did you kind of pick up that 40 hours was enough? Like, was there a time when you were doing 60 and you just kind of got a slap in the face, a proverbial slap in the face? Or was there like, no, I just always knew it inherently that 40 hours is where I needed to be so I can be a family man?
I just don't really like working that much either. So maybe that helped.
That could have something to do with it. Yeah.
Like I would, and it boiled back to this idea that real estate, although I saw a big opportunity to make money, the main reason that I was interested in building that business with my dad at the end of the day was because I wanted to earn his approval. And so I never really loved real estate all that much. I liked selling Keller Williams because I believed in it so much and I loved doing that. I love seeing it change people's lives, but I never really loved real estate enough to put more than 40 hours a week in it anyways. So that kind of worked to my advantage of me I could never get addicted to the work.
Okay.
And, I would do just enough to make sure that we were going to do an amazing job. And luckily my doing just enough ended up building the second most profitable and productive Keller Williams region out of 30 in the country. So we have a great territory, a great area. I got lucky in some ways along the way too. But I also knew that I didn't need to do too much. I wasn't going to throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks and just grind it out 60 hours a week. I was going to get really smart about which noodles are the ones I just want to fling over onto the wall because I already know they're going to stick.
Nice. Yeah, the ability to kind of have that thought process and analyze is one that most of us should seek? Like, was just inherent to you, or is it something you saw in somebody else? Or
I mean, I remember the first time David Osborne said to me he was ambitiously lazy. And I was like, oh, that's me. Like, I didn't have to try to become that. Like, I liked my downtime. I liked having personal time to do what I wanted. I have a lot of hobbies. I ran ultra marathons. I climb mountains. I snowboard. You know, I like to go out and have a good time with friends and family. And so, you know, there's a part of me that works hard so that I can have time with my family and so that I can do the things that I want to do, because otherwise, what's the point? And I think for the most part, if you get beyond like 50 hours a week, I would argue that you're actually not as productive as you think you are. And you're probably doing things you shouldn't be doing. And yeah, there's a season for it. Maybe it's a startup, or, you know, you're really bootstrapping something. But I think that we get into this habit of like thinking because a work week is supposed to be 40 hours, then that means 60 hours must be better, right? Well, the 40-hour work week's like an industrial complex bullshit idea anyways. So I just never subscribed to that belief. And to be honest with you, it probably came from me always hating that my parents were at work all the time. There's probably a part of me as a young man or a child where I'm like, I'm never going to work like that. Like, I'm going to show up for my family. I'm going to do fun things. I'm not going to be a work week, what do they call it? I'm not going to just be a work week slave, if you will, for lack of a better term, and know that I'm I'm at the mercy of my job at all times. Like, I just resisted that concept on every level.
So I know there's a lot of conversation.
Warrior, that was
Weekday Warrior. There you go. I know there's a lot of conversation that we have in GoBundance about, you know, like our kids are living a completely different life than we lived, right? And how do we instill the type of drive and effort into our kids that got us to be where we are? And at the same time, you're telling me, oh, no, I always knew 40-hour work week was good, right? So I think that's a good thing to be able to have the conversation about. So what sort of conversations do you have with your kids about what it means to work and earn what you're driving towards, as well as what are you showing on a day-to-day basis? Because more's caught than taught. So like, you know, the dichotomy between what you're saying, what you're showing, how are you kind of melding those two together for your kids to see what they should be driving towards?
Well, I try to remind them and talk to them as much as I can about and making the point around how I'm showing up to work is very strategic and also earned. So I work from home, and it is something that I worry about a little bit, is like, they never saw me when I was grinding 40 hours a week on one thing. I'm probably still working 40 hours a week, but I'm doing it when I choose to. They don't know I'm doing it. I might be even sitting next to them and shooting off a text or something where I'm working and I'm with them at the same time. Not that I'm taking my attention away from them, but as an entrepreneur, you're sort of able to pick and choose where and when you do your work. I remember when the Handspring phone came out, the first one that you could do email from. I absolutely could not wait to get my hands on the first smartphone, because I was like, this means I don't have to be behind a desk. Yeah. I could be out and about doing whatever I want, and I can still, when that email comes in, answer it. Whereas normally I'd be sitting in my office, like, working on stuff, but then there'd be like an hour or two period of time where there was nothing to do, and I would just be bored at work. And I'm like, what is this? What is this? This doesn't make any sense. So I think technology's really made it so that we're freed up and we don't have to be behind a desk for 40 hours a week. But I do try to instill in my kids, like, hey, if you want to have a great life, you're going to have to work for it. So I don't just give them money. If they want things, they have to earn it. And I think that's where I've focused more on, like, hey, you don't have a free ride. And the way I'm building my estate plan, they're not getting some big inheritance in the future.
Yeah.
If they don't prove that they're successful human beings, whether that's inside of my business or another business or a career they build, they will get really nothing. We'll have a family bank that they could borrow from, that they could pitch a business idea to, that they could get support and education from, not support in their life, but support on a business or an idea. But there's not some windfall that's coming to save them. Now, they will have access to that if they go and be productive humans. Then my trustees will allow them to be co-trustees and eventually take control of the family assets. But those assets won't be to be liquidated. They'll have to be investing them, and they're only going to be able to access the money that it spits out from being wise about it. So we've been pretty open with them about how that's going to work. And as we finalize our estate plan throughout this year, there'll be a lot more discussion around that. But we've really focused in on like family values too. Like, how do you show up in the world? We're servant leaders in our household. And, that means that we're generous and we take care of people and we lead through sharing our resources with others and taking a stand in the world for excellence. And I think that, values is really the thing that we talk about a lot, but hopefully they're catching through watching the way that I operate as a businessman, how to show up and live those values so that they are caught and I'm not just talking about them.
Yeah. I try to explain to people all the time that, like, if we looked at our family the same way we look at our business, especially those that run EOS, right? You're creating your core values, you're creating your vision, you're creating a mission statement. If you do that as a family, it's going to help you like enhance your conversations, your decision making, how you're going to be like, hey, is this in line with our vision, mission, and core values? Then okay, we're not going to do it, or yes, we are, based off of all of that. And so that like the family can see the why. And you've done a phenomenal job of doing that in your own family and kind of passing that down to FamBundance as well. And you even helped write the book on it, right? So talk to me a little bit about the creation of all of that with your family, like doing all of the family values and creating that vision, and then writing the book for other folks to be able to kind of do those projects themselves.
Yeah, I mean, so what you mentioned was my wife and I wrote The Miracle Morning for Parents and Families, and then 5 years later, we wrote a second edition because we're like, we've learned a lot in 5 years about parenting. Let's update it. And then we released a workbook, or what we call a playbook, that goes along with it. And it teaches 8 exercises to do at home with your family that help to lead an intentional family life. I mentioned earlier, like, that's the manual we kind of created. Yeah. And, it's something that's still evolving. Like, we could get more clear on the vision for our family. And when they were younger and not teenagers, the vision was about giving back, spending a lot of time as a family, going on epic vacations, and that's all great. But now it should evolve to more of like, what is the impact we want to make? And what do we want to see our efforts as a family and our legacy be? When my dad passed away, it became more evident to me like how powerful legacy really is, and how I'm now not only what I'm building with my family, doing for myself and for them, but also to honor my dad. And so the exercises we created in the book, they do talk about vision, and it's really in that regard about setting family goals. So every year, like, what do we want to do as a family? How do we want to show up? What's important? What do we want to accomplish and experience together? And it's also about individually knowing what each family member's goals are. In our family, we set one hard goal and one hard and one fun goal for each of our kids. So they're always working on a longer term couple of goals that we all share as a family in our family meeting. And so the vision really becomes co-created through the goals we're setting, and then also supporting each other in our individual goals. So that's a big part of what we teach in the book. And then, we're big believers in gathering the family once a week to really have a meeting where we talk about our values. We talk about what's been going well and what great experiences we've created individually or collectively as a family since our last meeting. And we share gratitude for one another and appreciate each individual family member in an intentional exercise. And then we talk about schedules and the goals that they've set and how they're doing on them. And then we look ahead on the calendar and talk about future vacations, but also what's happening next week and next month. So I think being highly intentional in that regard. There's another piece that I'll just share that's in the playbook, that in our family, we have something called the STAR system. And that is a way for us to sit down and the kids can suggest anything that they want to do in the house to earn stars. It could be from personal hygiene to picking up, to serving each other, to helping out in the kitchen, to doing their own laundry and cleaning bathrooms. And they negotiate with us how many stars they get for doing each one of those things and what's on the list. And then every day they've got to fill out their worksheet if they want to get stars. And if they earn their stars at the end of the week, they can trade them in for dollars. And that's kind of cool because it's like a family economy, and it teaches negotiation. It teaches what the value of something is, and it shows them that they can earn money and be productive in our household if they show up and do the right things, and that'll earn them some money. So rather than just standard chores or allowance, they've got to be a little more accountable, but they also have a lot of say in what they do. So those things have worked pretty well for us. In all transparency, my 16-year-old recently was like, I hate all of that stuff. I don't like you guys. You're annoying. So, you can think you're doing an amazing job, but once you get teenagers, things get a lot different, and you realize wow, when I thought things were hard when I had little kids, I had no idea that there would be this brief interlude where they were sweet and nice and they loved me. And then now they're teenagers and they're individuating and rebelling and wanting to do their own thing. And so it's been a little bit more challenging. We're probably going to have to revise the book and the manuals again with whatever we're learning in this new chapter. And I only say that just so that anyone that's listening, I don't want you to hear oh, this guy has it all figured out. His family life is perfect and everything's just always great at the McCarthy household. We have challenges, lots of them, just like any family does. And all I'm doing, and it's what all of our parents hopefully did too, is I'm just trying to do the best I can. And my wife and I are trying to do the best we can together and support one another, because it's not easy. This parenting thing, we were joking earlier, hey, this podcast is about business and being a dad. And I said something like, oh yeah, the two easiest things in the world to do. And we both laughed, because they're hard as shit. Being a dad is not easy, and owning and running a business is not easy. Doing the two together is also not an easy thing. And I think that's why we have to have conversations like this, because both you and I can get better from that. And we have to dive into the wisdom that other people are finding, because I might not get everything right, but I might get a few things right that if somebody's listening, they might be able to implement, and it makes their life a little easier. But it's not going to make it perfect. We're going to have to choose progress over perfection as parents 100% of the time.
So, one of the things I often ask about the dads, because oftentimes we're either running away from something they did or running towards something they did. And it sounds like your son may be at a stage where he's at least implying that he's going to be running away from some of the stuff you guys have done, right? So, and we also joke sometimes on the podcast that you're going to screw up your kid. It's just a matter of how much and with what things, right? So, one way or another, you're going to screw your kid up. So it's okay, well, I think that the progress and perfection is a perfect way to look at it and say, hey, am I adjusting the goal? Am I moving forward? Or am I just saying, well, you're just going to have to figure out how to make this work? Like, because clearly something has to change one way or another. So as you guys have seen some of the things change in your kids, and like in this particular instance, maybe this one's too fresh to have an answer to, but how have you started to shift how you approach the angle you're going at with your kids, especially you and Lindsay? Because to me, the way, in my belief, and you can poke holes in this if you'd like, but the way I structure it is I have my God, my wife, my kids, and then everything else, right? So if my relationship is not right with my wife, then things are not going to be going well with my kids. So I make sure that I'm aligned there better. And it sounds like, from my understanding of who you are, like you and Lindsay are on the same page in a lot of these things. So what sort of conversations do you guys have? What sort of things do you guys do to make sure that you guys are a unified front, pushing or at least kind of guiding and directing what's going on in the family and making the changes that need to be made when somebody comes and says, hey, what you're doing is stupid?
Yeah. Well, I think here's the good news is one of the things that's helping us navigate this more than anything else is how much work Lindsay and I have done on our relationship over the past few years. And we've been married 19 years. It'll be 20 years this September. Congrats. And we've done more work on our relationship, not because it was falling apart or broken or anything, honestly, but we've done more work on our relationship in the previous 3 or 4 years than we have in the prior 16 years. And I don't know if it was just dumb luck or something where our values are both aligned around growth, and we realize, like, hey, we've been having the same fight about different things for 16 years. Like, I love you, and we're able to get through those fights. At most, we're mad at each other for a couple of days a week, and then we bounce back and everything is great for 2 months, 3 months. So that's not a bad relationship. That's pretty good, actually, if you just disagree and have a fight every 3-4 months, and then after a week you're back to everything being peachy. The problem is that we were sweeping a lot of things under the rug in order to get back to everything being peachy, and then they would just rear their ugly head later in a different form. And so when my father died, we could no longer pretend like everything was peachy. It made all of our worst tendencies and problems in our relationship like exasperated and amplified. And so we went through a rough patch right after my dad died where it was like, yo, we got to really like dial this in. Like, why do we trigger the shit out of each other, even though we love each other so much? And we realized that it was because in a lot of ways we were the best possible person to trigger the deepest childhood wounds in each other because we loved each other so much and we opened up to each other so much. We also had access to the most vulnerable parts of each other. And so we both had to go on our own journeys and a journey together through counseling with like Dr. Kelly, a guy named Tony Linster, lots of breath work, lots of somatic work, lots of therapy individually and together, to where we both really took ownership of any of the childhood traumas and wounds that we had. We shared them with each other. And what I realized, I won't speak for Lindsay, is that I had to become a safe space for her to share anything that she needed to share. And I'm still working on that. I think it's a safer space. And she sometimes is not the most forthcoming with things that she's feeling or thinking. But I realized that, if she said something that was critical, it would trigger me and I would take it personally. And then I would, get angry, and it would make her shut down and not want to bring more things to me, which limits our ability to be connected and closer and actually to grow as a couple. So I had to do a lot of work on myself. And in doing so, like, I'm really proud of myself now because I can hear things that really make me uncomfortable, but not allow it to make me act out or say things in anger or do things that I regret later that I have to then come back and clean up. And that's also made it easier for Lindsay to open up to me. And it doesn't mean that what she says doesn't piss me off sometimes or often. It just means that my reaction is way more subdued and controlled and safer for her. So now I get to hear more things that make me angry. But it's a more real relationship.
Yeah.
It's more authentic. And so we're in a place now where if we weren't helping each other through this right now, it would be miserable. Like seeing your little boy grow up and kind of not like you anymore and kind of be like all this entrepreneur stuff and family meetings and values, like it's all annoying. Like, and then see him actually make decisions that we don't like and choose the speed excessively and almost lose his car and us to have to, put some boundaries in place. Us being a united front though, and supporting one another, hearing each other's pain in this, and then also being able to like set the boundary still, even if he's not going to appreciate it right now. Like our job is to create, especially me as the father, is to create boundaries that are non-negotiable. No matter how annoying I am, no matter how much you might hate me for it, this is the way that things are going to be. And it'd be hard to do that alone where we weren't on the same page, because then you'd be second guessing yourself. Like, am I being an asshole? Am I overbearing? Should I let my kid drive 100 miles per hour? Like maybe I'm just the jerk. But when it's clear that we're both aligned on something and we're willing to have the uncomfortable conversations, then it's almost bearable to go through the pain of your kids growing up and like pushing back so hard on everything that you've built.
Yeah, I think there's like 17 different things I'd like to comment on in there and then talk about more, right? So there's I think it's Jordan Peterson. He talks about how, being married and being open and honest with each other leads to a position where you guys both know, and you mentioned this too, the exact things in somebody's past that you can use to harm them if you chose to. And it's our choice. It's our choice not to do that makes this, bearable. It's our choice not to. And it's funny because I hear you say that, you can hear these things and not react, but all I've ever seen you is just kind of this normal, even keel guy the entire time. So I've never seen you kind of go off on anything, so obviously because I'm not living in the same house as you, but so just kind of hearing some of the things that you're talking about, I'm like, boy, I would have never pictured, Mike just kind of going off the handle on something, but we all do. Every one of us do, whether we want to admit it or not.
I'm quite adept at covering that side of me up because it hasn't served me. So I appear even keel, but I have a passion and a drive and a temper inside of me that's it's there. So I just say that so everyone knows, like, we all have that side of us that, and we may be locked away because it didn't serve us, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to come out when we're triggered. Right.
And that's something that I personally have been working on, because I was that guy back in my military day. Like they would call me up and say, hey, this guy screwed up. You need to go fix the problem. So I was the guy that would just go out and just berate people. Just like, I was just an angry dude. And I've done everything I can to push that away. And this is going to be a self-serving question, but I got to the point where I pushed it away so much that I became a passive person and was borderline afraid to go and have those tough conversations because I didn't want that. It was like the Hulk hiding behind. Like, how do I prevent myself from doing that? So, how have you kind of worked through some of that? Or what advice would you have for somebody like me to kind of say, hey, like, allow that to help you with your drive without it coming out and, a Hulk smash, coming out?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is to pause and to breathe, and that everything that I want to say in a given moment doesn't need to be said in that moment, that I still have future moments where I can communicate whatever that is. And I'm best served by really sitting with whatever it is and making sure that I soothe myself in a healthy way. And really, I'm in a calm space. And then it's safe to go, for others mainly, to go and communicate that. And so I had to really stop communicating out of an overreaction or even a reaction, and really sit more with how I was feeling and be able to come back and still say what was my ouch was or what my hurt was or what my issue is, but not do it in a way where I'm defending or attacking. I'm just saying, hey, this is on me. It's probably from something from my childhood, but would you be willing to just hear what I have to say? It's vulnerable, but can you just hear what I'm saying and not take it personally? And so taking ownership of like, if I'm angry, it's actually my fault. Like no one should be able to make me angry. And so can I step into it and say, hey, it's not your fault. It's something to do with my childhood, maybe even naming it. Are you willing to hear what I'm experiencing? And have my wife say, actually right now, no, I'm pissed at you. You're a dick. and me saying, okay, I need to go sit with myself even longer.
Yeah.
And then come back to her like, hey, are you ready now? Or she comes back, hey, I'm ready now. And then I can say like, hey, that thing that you said or you did or that happened, here's how I interpreted it through my younger self that's still struggling, and here's how it felt, and have her reflect back to me like, what I hear you saying is that was really challenging for you, and it brought up some of your childhood stuff, and I can see how that would be scary and make you angry. And is there anything that I can do to support you in that? And so that's become more often than not the way that we try to communicate with each other, as opposed to both of us defending and attacking when we're angry. And, you know, I'll remove myself from conversations and situations until I have a hold of that. And to your point, there's times and spaces where I need to speak up, and I probably don't, because there's a part of me that got in trouble for talking in school, and my running my mouth has gotten me in trouble before. And so it's also trying to acknowledge the truth of like, if I really feel like something should be said and it's going to serve whoever I'm saying it to, and it's going to be the truth that they maybe don't want to hear, but they need to hear, then I have to push past this part of myself that was silenced throughout my life, and who also I silenced myself, and actually say like, hey, I'm going to speak up right now, even though it would be safer for me to just shut up.
Yeah. And as I heard you say at the very beginning, let me pause and step aside. Let me think through that for a minute. I felt like there's almost a gorge between the immediate reaction, I'm ready to throw something, and this could go with your kids, this could go with your wife, it could go with a coworker, it could go with anything, right? Where you hear something that you're like ready to go off on, and then being able to stop yourself and walk away for a second, give yourself that composure. I would imagine there was, you talked about the therapy and talking to a bunch of folks. There was a lot of those conversations in between, learning to stop that self, get over that gorge, and then make it to the other side of being able to just turn around and step aside. So, is that something you still work on like a daily, weekly, monthly basis, that you have to remind yourself to step away, or is it borderline second nature at this point?
What I'm trying to work on now is stepping away from the part of me that still talks to myself that way. There's a part of me that, in order to get approval and to feel like I was worthy, decided that the best way forward was to create this voice inside of myself that is not kind to me, is not serve me. And it tells me like, you need to do more. You're not good enough. You need to do this. And it's a berating of sorts that I've been working on pretty intensely this year so far. It was the first time I really realized in a therapy session, and it brought out a lot of tears and emotion, was that, holy shit, I've been beating myself to success my entire life, and I've not given myself an inch. So when I'm hard on someone else in my life, or I get triggered or whatever, it's only a reflection of that internal voice that's also talking that same trash to myself. Yeah. Of like, you're not good enough. You're an imposter. You need to do more. You're wealthy, but there's people that are way wealthier than you, and you don't even deserve it. Like your dad helped you. Like there's just like this voice that I have to acknowledge. And I've tried to kind of in the past name that voice. And so I knew it was there, and I had a relationship with it where I was able to get it to shut up at times. But what I'm trying to do now is I don't want it to shut up. I want it to be encouraging to me. So it's almost like, and I named it this early on, the Terminator was what I named that side of myself. And I used to have a debate with it, like, hey, Terminator, I see that you want to get angry and take action and kill everyone. However, I don't need you to do that right now. Like, I got this, I can handle it. What I'm trying to do now is move more to like T2, you know, when they reprogram him and he comes back and now he's serving and he's protecting. I want to reprogram the Terminator now. I don't want to silence him. I want to reprogram him so that he tells me I'm good enough and reminds me that I'm valuable and that I'm loved and that I have a ton of people around me that love me and care about me and that would show up for me. And it's hard. Like, when I think back to some of my hardest times in life, it were when I was so lonely. Like, I remember in college between my sophomore and junior year, all 4 guys that we lived in the same house with, there was 5 of us. Those 4 guys, without telling me anything, went and rented another house that only had 4 bedrooms and said, oh, hey, we got a house. And I realized at like 20 years old, like, oh my God, I don't have a lot of great friends. Like, I'm alone. And so sometimes I still have that trauma embedded in me that was just a repeat of what happened my whole life. Like, I would be in a friend group and then get dropped. And, you know, you can see in it, like, why having something like GoBundance is so important to me, because I took me a long time to find my people, and then even longer to realize, like, oh, it wasn't that I was bad or wrong. It was that I was so much different than those groups of friends that I wasn't going to click with them. And it wasn't something that was wrong with me. And so that's what I'm working on today. And it's a tough thing. You know, I had a birthday party earlier this year and I was like, I'm just going to invite my close friends and keep it small. Well, like, there was 34 people at this party that were all my really closest, dearest friends. And it was surprising to me when I do this and I'm like, I'm going to invite these 36 people. I bet half of them can show up. And then when they're like, of course I'll be there. Yes, I'm going to show up. Yeah, I'll be there. Absolutely. I wouldn't miss it for the world. And then you have everyone but a couple people who had legitimate conflicts who couldn't make it, and they're all there. You're like, wow, that's amazing. For whatever reason, there's a part of me that's still shocked. Like, really? Like, they would all show up for me? That's amazing. And at that birthday this year, we actually did a thing called Fly on the Wall, which my friend facilitated, where they threw a sheet over my head and then they had a conversation for like 40 minutes, like I wasn't there, just talking about me. And it was all stories of how I'd helped them and I showed up this way for them and I built this thing selflessly. And it was like all the greatest reflections that I could have. And the reason for the sheet is because if you sat there without the sheet on your head, you'd feel this need to react and respond, even non-verbally, to what everyone's saying. And so you get to just sit there like a fly on the wall and listen to what people say about you. And when I heard that, it was just like, wow, like, people actually love me. Like, I do good shit in this world. Like, why is the voice in my head still telling me I'm a piece of shit? Like, there's some work to do there still, right?
Yeah. And how does that apply for you as a father then, as you're kind of trying to raise, you know, the way that I describe it is, you know, my goal as a dad is to raise, like, it's almost like being an entrepreneur in and of itself. I'm trying to build these businesses into these thriving machines that can survive without me. And I can just go on the board of advisors, board of directors later on in life, and I can no longer have to be the CEO, right? So right now you're still in the CEO role with a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, and you're kind of saying, hey, you know, trying to build and grow. But with the 16-year-old, you're much closer to the board of directors, board of advisors role than you are the CEO role. You're close to being able to release that. So as you're learning all of these things, how are you applying that to the kids to be able to teach them and train them so that, you know, they don't have to work through that same hurt later on because of something they experienced through you as they're growing up?
Yeah. It's funny. What came to mind was I'm kind of like Steve Jobs was to his board of directors when they fired him the first go around, right? Like, just because I'm the CEO doesn't mean that I get to stay there, right?
Yeah.
he's sort of fired me as the CEO for the time being and wants to make his own decisions. And, as the board, I can only do so much. So, how do I approach that? It's just having constant communication with them. Here's what I know is, if I want to connect with my 16-year-old son, do you know what I have to talk to him about? It's not entrepreneurship. It's not investing. It's not what he should be doing. It's not how he's behind in school. I have to go and talk with him about the video game that he loves the most, and who are all the characters, and why does he like them, and why does he like that game, and what's the object of the game. And I have to ask him about his friends and who they are and what they're into, and what have they done lately? What are they interested in doing? I have to talk to him about parkour and what latest flip and trick and whatever he's learning. Or I have to talk to him about cars. He loves cars. He's the
100 miles an hour down the highway.
He's a gearhead. So if I want to be connected with my son, all I have to do is go meet him where he's at. So even though he thinks I'm annoying and said he didn't like me, and he did apologize later for that, by the way, just in case anyone's wondering, like he is a sweet kid, and he understands that we're doing the best we can for him. He even said that, like, I know you're just trying to help me make good habits. I'm sorry that I said that. And I was kind of like, thank God, like, cause I had to watch my wife like melt in tears in front of me as he said this. So for her to hear it and me to take it in, I kind of knew through my relationship with my dad, like this is sort of natural, right?
Yeah.
But when you're the mom and you're seeing your little boy say that, like, it's hard for her not to blame herself and maybe even me, when really it's just the natural way of things. But if I go and meet him where he is, then our relationship is great. Like last Friday, he got out of school early. I was like, hey, you want to go-kart racing? Absolutely, let's do it. The whole day was amazing. Like, he had a great time. He wasn't upset at me. He didn't, and you can't do that and then try to slip in the like, hey, let's talk about how you're behind in math while we're go-karting, because then it ruins the whole thing.
Yeah.
You just got to go be with them where they're at with what they love and focus on them instead of your agenda and what you want to do. And so I'm sitting in that place right now where I just know that it's more important for me to connect with him than it is to correct him.
The intensity behind the being present is very difficult sometimes, like especially with that phone that you talked about having in your pocket when you first, what was it? I don't remember what phone you called it when you first realized that you could take the email.
Handspring.
The handspring. The Palm Pilot stuff. Right. So like so many people look at our phones and technology and all this stuff to say, hey, like we can continue to work even more now. And you looked at it as a way to separate yourself. And now when you're sitting here with kids and you're saying, hey, like I need to be fully present, but still have this thing that's in my pocket, but still have all this stuff that's on my brain, but still like it is a lot of work to really stay focused with a kid. And I don't have a 16-year-old. My oldest is 10. So it's a lot easier for me to stay engaged in what they want to do. But you're talking about something that's at a different level, especially as you're trying to build, you're building a trust and you're thinking, man, I need to prepare this kid to be able to take on to this trust later and be able to potentially be a junior trustee. Like, how are you managing to kind of say, hey, I don't care about any of that stuff right now. This is totally just, let's just do this. Let's just enjoy this. Like, that is a big thing to parse in your brain and conversations. How the heck you pull that off? Like, I have a hard time with it with my 10-year-old on a golf course, right? Let alone my 16-year-old going through all of it.
I mean, I'm not perfect, but I also realize that I get plenty of time on my phone and I don't get a lot of time with my son. So, and I don't need a ton of time. What I need is highly focused quality time. And the good news is that if you're doing it right, you won't be able to look at your phone, because you'll be so engaged in what they're saying and so in the conversation that reaching for your phone won't even come up. So I would argue that if you're reaching for your phone and you're not focused on connecting with them. And if you are focused on connecting with them, but you're still reaching on your phone, then you probably aren't doing it the way that you need to be doing it. When I'm there, I have to listen to if the second that he thinks I'm not listening, I lost him. The connection is severed. So it is intense. It's not easy. It's also something that is not come naturally to me at all to do with kids, because I never had that modeled for me.
Yeah.
That was not something that my parents were good at. To this day, my mom isn't good at it. To the day my dad died, it was hard for us to connect. They were not showing up and asking me all about my life and showing super interest in it and going deep with it. And it just takes a lot of focused curiosity, and you need to authentically get curious. What does this kid love? Why does he like video games so much? Let me ask him how this video game works. Why is it fun? What characters are in it? What are their powers? How do you win the game? What's the strategy? How do you link up with other kids? Who do you play with on it? I just have to if I get really curious, then it works great. I'm super connected to him, and I don't even think about touching my phone because I'm in it. I'm in the conversation. And I think it's when we get bored of something that we accidentally grab for the phone. It's not because we have to do something on it or we need to do this work, or sometimes it is, it's ringing and it's there and there's an emergency. But most of the time it's just out of boredom and bad habit, that we reach for the phone. And so just be aware, be aware of, am I really in this conversation fully and with this kid right now? If so, then if I'm thinking about my phone at all, then I need to shift gears and ask them a better question, show more curiosity that's genuine, and keep going. And it's awkward at first. I'm getting much better at it, but I wish I had learned this a lot earlier, honestly, because if you start with them at a younger age, they'll get used to it and probably stay connected and have more conversations with you and even come and volunteer the information to you. So I started way too late with this strategy. So I hope if just one person hears this and they engage with their 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 8-year-old at a deeper level because of what we're saying, then they're going to be so thankful when their teenager is still connected to them in a deeper way. So I didn't get it right, I don't think, in this regard. So this is sort of a cautionary tale. And also, I'm trying to get it right now.
Yeah, I think it's a constant thing anyways. As parents, we're supposed to be constantly evolving as dads to make sure that we are receiving the right input and then putting the output that's required based off of that input. And if we continue to just do the same output regardless of what the input coming in, then obviously we're going to be failing miserably. I don't have to keep changing diapers when they're 15. It's a different output at this point. I have to be doing something different. So, so are there any other things that, as we're getting close to kind of wrap it up, any other things that are popping up in your brain that you're just like, hey, I really wish that we would have talked about this, or I really want to share this particular thing, whether it's something to do with dad, business, whatever?
No, there's not anything we hit a lot of different things. I really enjoyed the conversation, probably because I got to talk most of the time, but I think you asked great questions and we got to hit a lot of different areas. I think maybe one area we didn't talk about a lot was just the power of parenting inside of a community and the concept of it takes a village, because I really think that finding other parents that are like-minded and that you're on a journey, the same journey with, and share values with, and then having them be willing to show up for your family when it's needed. When we've been through some of our darkest and most troubling times, we've had great community show up around us. And, when we had challenges with our son, we got a lot of love and support from some of our closest friends who understood what we were going through. And I think just knowing that you can't do this alone, and we're not built to do it alone. We're supposed to be in a tight-knit community of people. That's how humans lived for thousands of years before we started putting up fences and, separating ourselves and sort of isolating and trying to do this family, fatherhood, parenthood thing on our own. I think we're really meant to do it together. And there's there's really this concept of like the fun uncle. You know, what David Osborne might say to my son might be better received coming from David than it is from me. Yeah. And who wouldn't want their child to be getting wisdom from David Osborne, right? Like, and I know maybe a listener doesn't know who he is, but he's a prolifically successful businessman who has a giant heart and who's always evolving and is just a loving, caring, passionate, compassionate human being. So why wouldn't I want him or his wife, Tracy, who's equally as much of a powerhouse, pouring into my son and to my daughter and telling them things that maybe I can't tell them because they're not going to always listen to what we say. And I think we can't understate the value of building a community of families around you that really have your back and that can speak wisdom into your children.
Yeah, completely agree. I say the same thing about sports and stuff. Like you're a coach, when they say something, the child hears it so much different. That could be the same exact thing that a dad says, but when the coach says it to something very different, and the same thing goes for that fun uncle that's around that can be able to provide that feedback. So I really appreciate that. Yeah. One thing that you said there, though, reminded me of a question that I had earlier, where I had asked about where your dad kind of got the thought of, you don't know when the end of your life is going to be. Just go ahead and keep on living and enjoy that. And then you had turned around and said maybe one of the better questions would be, where did he get the drive to be a millionaire? And it was perfect because I wanted to go down that route, but then forgot. So I wanted to ask that first question first because there are a lot of, especially entrepreneurs, who are chasing a number, how to become that millionaire, how to become a decamillionaire, a centimillionaire, whatever they're chasing, but forgetting about the living the life side, especially as a dad, and forgetting that, your last name is going to be what your legacy actually is, not the bank account that you leave, right? What are your kids going to say about you later? What are your grandkids going to know about you? And what sort of values are you passing on to your kids? Not sort of what dollars are you passing on to your kids? So I want to go ahead and as a maybe a closeout question, just kind of go, what are your thoughts on that thought process of balancing between chasing the dollars versus, raising the kids up in a way that, sets them up well for life, not necessarily with money again, but with the tools that they need to survive this life well, to make well of their own life? Yeah,
I mean, I think you can do both. Like my favorite answer to any optional question is both. I think sometimes we think it's an either or, and I think it's a both and. And I think that, my dad, I think when he found out that, and when his father died at 67, he started thinking, I may only have till I'm 67. And I know that when my dad died at 69, my thinking shifted to, holy shit, what if I only have till I'm 69? Like that's just a little over 20 years from now. Mm-hmm. And so that forces you to really think about the actual time value of money, not the investing type, but the type that says like, well, if I only had 20 years or 10 years or 5 years to live, how would I spend my life? And then the question would be, why aren't you spending your life that way now? Because nothing's guaranteed in the future. And I think chasing money is great, but the reality is that even if you build a huge fortune, the odds that you pass that fortune past the third generation or even into the third generation is less than 10%. That's a fact. Like that's a well-known in studying wealth and legacies and estate planning that, wealth doesn't make it past the third generation oftentimes. And the reason is because the parents who are building that amount of wealth aren't spending enough time with the children so that they learn how to handle that much wealth. Mm-hmm. It's not a hard thing to see the parallels there. And so if you are off working and you use the excuse, I'm doing this for the family, well, then you should ask them if they want you to do it or not. Yeah. Because if you're going to make that decision for them, shouldn't they have a say in it? Because I bet if you asked them, they would say, actually, we'd be okay with a little less money and a little more you. And I think we've got to stop using the family as the excuse for not spending time with the family, like without their permission.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I can't agree with that much more. Like, that's one of those things that I try to preach to folks all the time is, you can't say that you're doing this for your family when you never see you. So pay attention to who they are, what they're doing, what you're driving towards with them. So on that happy note, Mike, I greatly appreciated the conversation. I thank you so very much for jumping on, for sharing with me a lot of different stories. We went down so many different paths. There was a lot going on there. But I thank you very much for being open and vulnerable and sharing a lot of your experience with me. If folks wanted to reach out, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you to learn more or to talk about what you got going on?
Yeah, so someone could email me at mikemccarthy@me.com. They could go to my website, gomikemccarthy.com, or I'd love some additional followers on Instagram. I post a lot of stuff about families and fatherhood on there, and that handle is gomikemccarthy.
Love it. We'll have all that in the show notes for folks to reach out. For any of the GoBundance guys listening, we've got a FamBundance event coming up soon. So definitely be looking out for that. If you're in GoBundance, be checking out the FamBundance event coming up. Looking forward to hearing about it. Sadly, I won't be able to make it. It's like a week before my wife retires from the Air Force. Yes. So I won't be able to go to that, but hopefully we'll be able to go to the next one.
That's why we made sure to plan the best one.
Yeah, that was nice of you. I really appreciate that. That made me feel real good, warming. But thank you again, Mike. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please send a comment. Write a comment down below. Let us know what your favorite part was. Reach out to Mike. Follow him on Instagram, Go Mike McCarthy. And thank you all again. Thank you, Mike. And we'll see everybody on the next show.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you so much for listening to the BizDad Podcast. We hope you found some value in your time here with us, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and share so you and your friends won't miss our upcoming episodes. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Rumble, where we continue these discussions and share more valuable content. Be the dad you know you need to be and run your business in a way you're proud to share with your kids. Keep crushing it.